Luckily, that's not it. I have to tell you that it's really with the greatest humility that I stand here between you, my friends, my family, my colleagues, my rabbis, and my teachers, to stand before you in front of the Torah. I'm not sure what gives me the scoot to be here and to do that. It's a humbling experience to think about it. Who am I to act as an intermediary? But I thought about it. And as I sat and I thought about what I was going to say that would make a difference here, the word Kohelet, Ecclesiastes, actually came into my mind. You see, Kohelet told us that there is this unavoidable circularity to life. That the sun rises and the sun sets, and that what we do basically is useless here. Because the mechanics of the world are the mechanics of the world. And human nature is such that some of the time that we spend here, what are we achieving? I think Kohelet misses the point. It isn't the sun rising and setting that is important, though I recognize the mechanical need for it and the beauty, the absolute beauty of the sun going up and going down. And I recognize the incredible preciseness of God's having created the world, how everything works. But the truth is, it's what happens between sunrise and sunset that makes the difference. See, dawn and dusk are just bookends in a library that we call life. And the point of a library is not the bookends, right? It's what's in between the bookends. It's what's made available to the world through the books that are there. It's what we do in our days that's important, not the rising and the setting of some fiery orb. And it's with that knowledge that I'm able to stand here in the presence of this holy community and in the presence of God. And friends, you should know that like so many of you here, I've chosen to sanctify the time between sunrise and sunset by bringing Torah to the world. Each of us has a unique way to do this because Torah is filtered through our life experience. And that's what makes it Torah. It stands brilliantly by itself, but it stands even more brilliantly when surrounded by us in love. So when I first learned that I would need to give this sermon, I knew that I wanted to speak about Lech Lecha. Because when that story is such an incredible story, at the beginning of the journey, Abraham learning that he is going to be the father of people. And given my own Jewish journey, I said, you know what, that's perfect. Unfortunately, when I got to the computer screen, Lech Lecha had already been taken a few times. And there wasn't much left. And I said, what am I going to do? And then I scanned the list and I said, the Shalach is there. And I knew that was my gift from God. That was my gift. Because this parashat is messy. And it's cluttered. And there's a lot of dysfunction in it. And that is a perfect parashat for my senior sermon. It's got rich narrative. It's got law. It's got miracles. It's got fetching. It's got drama. It's got God acting in love. It's got more fetching. It's got God acting in anger. Shabbat, man from heaven, war, leadership, and yes, more fetching. As I consider and reconsider my personal rabbinate, there are lessons in this parsha that will be key to what it is that I want to alter the world. First, sometimes the long way is the only way to go. Second, every moment is a convergence of the past, the present, and the future. And three, everyone needs help at some point in his or her life. The parsha begins like this. When the people left Egypt, God did not lead them by way of the land of the Philistines, although it was nearer. For God said the people may have a change of heart when they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people round about by way of the wilderness at the Sea of Reeds. Now it seems counterintuitive, right? To send them the long way. We've got a massive uncertain humanity here, and the longer they're not settled, the greater the possibility of a problem. Rashi tells us that the more direct route would make it too easy for the Israelites to turn back to Egypt at the first sign of trouble. And Rashi's analysis is actually borne out in the text, right? Because how many times do the Israelites lament their having left Egypt and actually want to say, well, let's go back? It doesn't make sense, but they do it. Now, let's apply this practically. Some might say that my journey has been roundabout. I baked bagels as a teenager, built parks and worked in a lumberyard as a young adult, attempted some comedy, went to law school, got married, worked as a lawyer, raised a family, volunteered in the Federated Jewish Community for years, became increasingly involved in ritual Jewish observance, and ultimately decided to become a rabbi. And I can tell you that if I had taken that direct route, if I had gone right to rabbinical school, I, as God had feared of the Israelites, would have run right back to Egypt. Had I been younger when I started my process here, then when I spent time visiting wayward souls in a county mental health facility, or when I stood with a family in a circle holding hands and praying as their mother passed away, or when I was called up to Toronto last week to perform a funeral for a beloved member of the congregation, the cantor's wife that passed away, and I had to go off to perform that. I can tell you that if I had started a long time ago, I could never have done that. Indeed, I probably would have turned just like the cowardly lion in The Wizard of Oz and run and jumped right through the stained glass windows and never looked back. I could not have been God's holy emissary. Likewise, if Sherry and I had not experienced traumatic infertility, I could not possibly be present at birth rituals the same way that I am today, recognizing the miracle that is God's every and each creation. Indeed, the long way provides more than just time. Nechama Leibovitz paraphrases Rambam from Guide for the Perplexed. God sent the Israelites the long way in order to accustom them to hardship, to toughen them for the fight to conquer the promised land. Thus, the diversion to wilderness was not only a preventive act to stop them from running back to Egypt, but it was also an act of education, a measure to give them a measure with positive significance, to train them for the greater tasks ahead. Now, I like Rambam's view. My legal wilderness years helped me to prepare for my rabbit. And when I look back at them, though much of them were unenjoyable and tedious and unfulfilling, I didn't really like being a lawyer too much. I realized that those years are an important part of who I am today. So the question is, point 2. Everything we do is comprised of the past, the present, and the future. How does the text tell us this? What does the text do to tell us that everything that we do is comprised of the past, the present, and the future? At the beginning of the parsha, we're told that as the Israelites are leaving Mitzrayim, as they're leaving Egypt, Moshe personally goes and takes Joseph's bones with him to take them on the journey. And Joseph represents the past and the promise of a future. And Moshe has a keen sense of the importance of what Joseph and his bones stand for. But near the end of the parasha, Moshe speaks to Joshua, and he tells him to choose some men to do battle with Amalek. Indeed, this is the first time that Joshua is mentioned in the Torah. As we all know, Joshua will ultimately be appointed the leader, and he will take the Israelites into the promised land. Joshua presents the future. So we've got the past and we've got the future. Everything in between where Joseph's bones are taken and where Joshua is appointed, that entire pericope, and I'm so glad I got to use that word in a sentence, everything that happened, all of that represents the present. The present is the fulcrum that balances the past with the future. Joseph's bones don't need to be retrieved in order to leave Egypt. God doesn't command it, and yet Moshe has to do it. He is compelled to bring the past with him, to sanctify the past. Joshua does not need to be named the field general, but he is. And that's the future. The future is important. And the rabbis understood the connection between past, present, and future. All we need to do is take a look at the Amidah. Starts off with the patriarchs, the matriarchs. We've got a plea for redemption, and much of the others, prayers that are in there have to do with routine daily affairs. What's going on? Continuity, past, everything that we do today, we connect with our past and our present and our future. Continuity is holy, and that's the Torah's lesson. The third point I want to make is that everyone needs help at some point, even great prophets like Moshe. This is illustrated near the end of the parashat. The Amalekites are fighting the Israelites. Where is Moshe? He had appointed Joshua to fight, but Moshe is on top of a mountain, and he's watching. And every time his hands are raised, what happens? The Israelites are victorious. But when his hands get lowered, the Amalekites are winning. They're seizing the moment. And what happens? Everything is going on swimmingly until Moshe loses his strength. The hands go down. The Israelites are losing. What happens? Aaron and Hur come, and they pick up. They help him out and pick up his arms. They don't have to, but they do. And Moshe willingly accepts their help. And the result of this nurturing act was an Israelite victory. And the Amalekites went to defeat. And the fact that they do this and that Moshe accepts their help is instructive. There are times in our lives that we need help. We need to accept the fact that we need help. And then once we accept the fact that we need help, we need to get that help. Let me give an example from my own personal experience. Over the last 4 years, I had been a New Battle Fellow. The fellowship, thank God, paid much of my tuition. The fellowship ended. What was I going to do? I needed some way to be able to pay. And most of you know, the economy is not great out there. Not a lot of stuff going on. What do you do? I was lucky enough to learn about a program from United Synagogue where they created a fellowship to help to seed new congregations. So I found United Synagogue, and United Synagogue paid a portion of my tuition for this year through the fellowship. Thank God. But they didn't pay all of it. What do you do? What do I do? I wasn't taking out loans. I'm 50 years old. I couldn't take out loans to finish. And that's when a miracle sort of happened. Our friends came to us and said, you have to continue. Let us find the funds for you. Let us get them. And I said, I can't take money from my friends for this endeavor. And they said, you don't have to take our money. We will find other people to do it. And I said, with that as a condition, do it. And do you know that my friends found that money? And they paid the rest of my tuition. I needed help, and they gave it to me. My hands were weary, and they picked them up. The message, a rabbi can make a community. But many times it takes a community to make a rabbi. So we talked about the long way is sometimes the best way to go. And that each step we take in life is imbued with the past, present, and future. And that everyone needs to accept help at some point. But there's one final point that I want to bring out. The text tells us that when the Israelites entered the Red Sea, when they entered it, there was a wall of water on their right and a wall of water on their left. And as if to highlight, to make this incredible feat more important, they actually repeated 8 lines later that there was a wall of water. But why highlight it? I think it's because the trip through the Red Sea was the most perilous point, the most perilous part of the journey. They are in a narrow, unnatural passageway. They are being followed, pursued by the Egyptians in the past, and they're looking to their future. And what happens? Right there, as they're there, with the future ahead of them, what's happening? God, with all of God's heart, and all of God's soul, and all of God's might, is holding those walls up for the Israelites to cross. In love. In incredible love. And by holding back those walls, God enables the past and the future to interact through the fulcrum that is the present. And it is because of God's involvement that the Israelites at that time sang a song. Ozi, Zimrakia, Valihili, Yeshua. The Lord is my strength and might. He is my deliverance. Because what they realized was there is a past and a present and a future, and there is us. But all of it works because there is God, the Kadosh Baruch Hu. I would like to do a visualization. I want to hum the tune for Ozzy, if you would join me. And as we hum this tune, I want you to think about your past. Each of us should think about our past, our present, and our future. And as we hum it, please think of God weaving a tapestry, taking each of our past and our present and our future, and creating a beautiful, original, rich tapestry that is each of ours.
Shakawach.